Howdy, y'all. It's Curious Raven on this Thursday. I hope y'all are having a great day. Today we have 7 haunted house stories. Please enjoy. Number 1. As I age, I often find myself recounting my paranormal encounters from my youth. I have a hard time explaining some of these occurrences, but I would say I lean more towards being skeptical now. I also don't share a lot of my stories for 2 reasons. I don't want to sound crazy, and weird things happened when I talk about them. However, there are 2 instances of seeing blue children that I have found no evidence for online or IRL. The first ghost I remember seeing was a blue girl. She always made me feel uncomfortable when she showed herself. It wasn't her presence that was disturbing, but rather the constant luring by her. Let me explain. As a child, I spent many nights with extended family. My godmother's apartment in particular always freaked me out. She notoriously slept on her couch every night, leaving me with a queen bed all to myself. She would leave the door open to her room in case I got fussy and needed to check on me. Directly past the bedroom door was a hallway which had a built-in cabinet. I vividly remember many nights where the door to the cabinet would open by itself on one of the shelves. Looked like a blue girl laying down and staring directly at me. She wouldn't say anything, but rather signaled with her index finger to come here. I never did because, what the fuck, that's terrifying for a 7-year-old. I was not interested in whatever she had planned and would just throw the blanket over my head until I fell asleep. I pushed that down for many years and chalked it up to being an overactive imagination. That was until nearly a decade later I saw 2 more blue children. I was watching my grandparents' house while they were out of town. I was a little scared because another paranormal encounter I had experienced years before at their house. But I was old enough to control my racing mind. As I walked upstairs to go to bed, I heard little footsteps running around the corner and down the hall. I don't have the best vision, but I know what I saw. It was a little blue girl with dark, long hair. She had ran and hid behind a large vase in the hallway. As she popped her head out, I saw another blue child behind her, this time a smaller boy with dark hair. They giggled and waved. I still get shivers from that. I ran into my room and bolted the door. Never saw anything like that again. Anyways, has anyone else had an experience with a blue ghost spirit Jinn children? I'm really at a loss because I don't know of anyone else who had seen something like this. Number 2. I don't even know where to begin. Basically, my girlfriend and I recently have been experiencing some weird activity on our property. It started out with just something moving, noises, tapping on the window, strange noises outside. We own around 40 acres and have farm animals. Weird things have been happening, such as last night she locked the door to the house, and this morning it was unlocked and open. Previously, if one of us is home alone, the door will open on its own. The house is separated from the barn by about 100 yards to lay reference. We've had rabbits and chickens and cats out there. We were attempting to breed rabbits for about a year with no luck, and the only time we ever had babies, we brought them into the house because it was too hot for them outside. But with multiple different pairings outside, nothing. Then, the same thing with a cat we have. Outside, she never got pregnant with multiple boys that were there, so we assumed she was fixed as we were given her as an adult, and inside she immediately gets pregnant. Today, something was chasing our horses around the pasture. They were very clearly running from something, and there was nothing there. There's been more weird things. These are just the ones I'm remembering right now. We'll update as I remember more. Number 3. Something strange has been happening in my apartment. I'm very skeptical with the paranormal, but I grew up on a reservation, surrounded by events like this, but after years of living a pretty normal life, I'm stumped at this. My brothers and I live together, and at around 8 p.m. to 4 a.m., according to them, something rattles the door or pushes against it. I'll explain the door incident itself literally. Put yourself against a door, and you'll hear your clothing make contact and kind of whoosh sound it makes. You'll also hear the hinges creak and a bit when you press against it. That's what my brothers told me a while back, and I just laughed at them saying there's no ghost here and knock it off. One of them told me he held the door against an invisible force, while the other was in shock and disbelief staring at him. I could tell they were scared, so I told them to wake me up so I can confront them, because I always assume these somebody lurking waiting to rob us. 2 days ago, I went to heat up leftovers and the door shook and the handle rattled. I walked over, angry, and opened the door wide open and nothing was there. There's a staircase that goes up and leads outside, but it is literally impossible to run up those stairs with no noise in that short a time and close both the door and screen door without a noise. There are no nook or crannies to be found. I've looked for hidden cross spaces, windows, doors, etc., and nothing came up. There has never been incidents with the wind doing this, nor a change in pressure. Something pressed itself against the door literally 3 hours ago, and a scratch mark was left on it. Being Lakota is to accept that these things happen and ceremony must take place, but I am not traditional. Each scenario is equally terrifying. On one hand, there's the possibility of a person playing some elaborate prank on us, or something followed us home while visiting family. Number 4. So I'm very new to this subreddit. I only joined 20 minutes ago and I was just reading some stories. So I've decided to share my own story. In my house, I live right next door to my grandparents' house. I've been told that at least 2 to 3 people have died in their house, so I believe that their spirits may have been transferred into my house. Either something that was brought over, such as old clothing or anything, because for the past few months, really weird things have been happening. I was eating my dinner once and the sink's tap just flicked up and turned on by itself. I've also noticed that when I'm gone, some objects are moved and some lights are turned on. Objects fall, and I believe I've seen an apparition, although it was dark and I could be wrong. I also hear strange noises coming from the house, like someone is hitting the walls or possibly kicking furniture, but it could be the house settling. So let me know what you think. I'm not quite sure, so I decided just to ask you. Number 5. There was this one time I had to go and get the food my uncle was preparing. It was around 12 to 1 a.m. midnight. It was just a normal late night for me. So I got to my uncle's and waited for the food, while also staring at the main doorstep. They always turn the lights off, causing this particular place to appear pitch black. My uncle had returned and gave me the food. I thanked him, and I saw my grandma still on the doorstep. I called her, but she just walked outside. My uncle asked why did I call her, and I answered, I just saw her. Why is she still outside? My skin crawled when he said Grandma was already in her room sleeping. I didn't help but ask him who I saw. He shrugged and answered, "Stop scaring yourself." And he stayed calm the rest of the night to prevent me from freaking out. I know he too sometimes sees something because that house is known for being haunted, and even my grandma can see the apparitions. She sees a girl and a man, and sometimes a woman dressed in a gown. I haven't seen an actual ghost, only shadows, but the experience still freaks me out like I'm actually seeing a real one. Number 6. This happened a while ago, but sometimes I still can't stop wondering what it was. We moved into a new house while I was pregnant in 2016, and I had my baby. I started getting strong smell that would linger for a minute or two. It was a very pleasant smell of cologne. Not anything my spouse or I had. It would only last for a bit and disappear, but it happened randomly, while taking out the garbage, while cooking dinner. When my son turned 2, he would randomly play and then look at the door and get so scared and cry and scream and say there is a man standing there. When we would go to sleep, he wouldn't fall asleep or lay down because he said there's a man standing next to my bed. He would be so terrified. It would happen 2 to 3 times per month. Sometimes wouldn't happen for several months. It never happened when my spouse was at home. My son loved going to daycare and hated coming home because he would say, "No, mean man at daycare. Man only home. He is not nice." One day, when I was home alone with my son, my friend and her daughter stopped by to pick something up. They had no idea about anything going on in the house. Her daughter was about 3 at the time. While we were chatting, the girl went to get a toy and from a different room started screaming there. She said there's a man standing watching her play, and she ran out and had to leave. She was terrified. Then it would stop for a few months, then start again. This man would appear in the mirror for my kid, randomly appear in the closet where I would get dressed. Is this all their imagination? Why didn't this happen when my spouse was home? Then it suddenly stopped when he was about 4. We never spoke about it. Strong smell also disappeared for me. What was this? Let's just say a ghost. How can he just come and go every month? And if it was in fact some ghost, did he actually leave or the kids just don't see him any longer? Sometimes I keep going back to those days and I'm so confused what that was all about. It was terrifying. Number 7. Hope this finds you all well. Started last night. Took my dog outside to go to the bathroom via the patio door to the backyard. When I went back to take him inside, the door was locked. Went to take her out again later at night. We have a motion sensor light that is pretty sensitive and will trigger to things as small as bunnies running across the yard. I went to the edge of the deck, and as soon as I touched the steps, the light turned off. And it wouldn't turn back on until I walked back up to the door where the light is. Tonight my wife was at home with our black lab, and the dog started barking at her with its hair raised on her back, like agitated, warning her to move. She's barked before when she wants to play, but this was different, and then my wife had a feeling or dread come over her. When she went into the kitchen, there was dog food spread across the floor. The bin was all locked up in its usual place and not near where the food was. She's now parked outside my work with the dog waiting for me to get done. Any advice or ideas? We purchased this house just over 2 years ago and haven't had any problems at all. House was built in 2002 in a newer suburb. Alright everyone, that is the end of our collection today. I hope y'all enjoyed. I still feel like I'm trying to get back into the narrating flow from not narrating for 2 weeks. But no, I love y'all very, very much. And I will see y'all on Saturday for creepypasta. But until then, remember, it's scary out there. Please like and subscribe. Howdy y'all, it's Curious Raven on this Saturday with a creepypasta. This is going to be a shorter video. The story is called Please Help Me. It's by Cox Long 6090420. Please, if you're reading this, for the love of God, save me. My name is Alex Fuller. I'm a SWAT officer with the Noah Police Department in Noah, Maine. It's a small town, only around 800 people. I've only lived in Noah for 2 years and had this job for less than a year. Nothing of note really happens here, so my job is rather unfulfilling. You'd think, why the hell does a small town need a SWAT team? Truth is, I always wondered that, and I fucking know now. I got a call from the department today. They told me to head to the station and gear up. Now, for one, it isn't normal for me to get a call to go on a job. Normally, I have to do a regular police work like patrols and typical police shit like that. So I got my shitty Chevy Spark and headed to work. It was absolute chaos. Everyone in the station was scrambling over stuff, almost sprinting to answer calls. Everyone seemed to be in total panic. Without a second left to think, Chief Roberts boomed with his voice. Fuller, get your damn gear on and get your ass ready. Robert was an imposing but gentle man. His voice was like a massage to the ears. He looked like if Sam Elliott was a professional wrestler, so to see him this upset sent a shiver through my bones. After getting my gear, my AR-15 rifle and Beretta M9, I met with the rest of the team outside next to the armored transport, and before I knew it, we were filing into the truck and speeding through downtown. No one normally at this time of day was bustling with people going on errands, the mom and pop stores opening and thriving, and children playing. But it was empty, like someone had snatched everyone from the town. The few people I saw were locking their stores or on a panicked phone call. Eventually, we turned onto Street Drive, a neighborhood bordering the large woods to the east of the town. As we blew through the streets, it was barren just like downtown. Nobody was grilling out front, no children playing in the yards and streets. It was too quiet. It was quiet with the team, too. Nobody was talking, not even Simmons, who doesn't know how to shut the hell up. Felt like I was missing something, like it was all one big joke, and it was "Don't tell Alex a damn thing" day. We stopped at the end of the road, where the large forest stood imposingly. The woods in Noah have always gave me a terrible vibe. I lived on the west side, so I rarely saw them. But when I did, it always looked like an old-ass Pet Cemetery movie. Fog would cloak the forest like a blanket. The trees stood like giants against a man, and their roots stretched out like tentacles reaching for me. Peters flung the back door out when we stopped, and we all got the order to file out. As I stepped out onto the empty street, I swear I could hear a howl. It was inhuman screech that filled my soul with dread. We got the order to move out into the woods. Then came the same damn feeling of dread eating at my soul. As we move into the woods, watching each other's backs, we come upon an old, dilapidated building. It's strange. There was almost nothing around it, just the naked woods. It wasn't some kind of cabin either. It was a big industrial building, almost like a machine shop. A big sign hung over the entrance. It read, "Faucked Industries." There was a massive claw-like slash through the sign, almost like something you would see out of the Jurassic Park movies. Robert asked a question on the radio, too quiet to understand him. We could hear the operator yelling at him to move in though, so I guess it was dire. If only we could have known. We move in slowly, checking each corner and blind spot. I follow my squad and I notice typical graffiti on the walls and on the old ruined furniture. We leave the admission area and enter the shop floor. The writing on the wall slowly changed from the typical skater kid art to pleas for help, warnings, and mad ravings. Some wrote in a dark red color. The hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I feel cold. So cold. I knew whatever was on the other side of these doors into the shop floor would be the worst thing I could ever see. Another inhuman screech comes from inside the shop somewhere. Jenkins jumped into me when we heard it, almost causing me to pull my gun on him out of instinct. Robert takes points and kicks open the door. We all file into the room. Old dilapidated machines litter the room. Watching my step, I round the corner without my squad to see a hole in the wall. It wasn't a normal broken wall hole. It was perfectly circular void, emitting a hollow groan. As I call for backup, fast footsteps, like someone was running 30 miles per hour, crashes through the shop floor. I hear one of the squad mates screaming for his life. I turn around to see something truly inhuman. A 12-foot tall, skinny, skinless humanoid creature was the source of the footsteps. It was completely bald, and had Roberts in his long, gangly arms. Roberts begins yelling as we all open fire on the creature. It doesn't even seem to acknowledge our presence as its jaw unhinges like a snake. Roberts stopped screaming, accepting his fate. I watched the thing swallow him whole. Saw Roberts slide down its skinny throat like a snake. The fucking thing turns to us and lets out the screech. And more of those things reach out of the far side of the shop. I turned into the hallway we came out of and I ran. Ignore the running, the screaming, the gunfire. I ran faster than I have ever in my life. I didn't know where I was going. I just had to get the fuck out of there. I dove into the transport, reaching for the keys in the center console. The transport kicked on with a twist of the keys and I floored the gas. As I drove out of there, I looked in the rearview mirror to see one of those fucking things chasing after me on all fours with a massive, toothless smile. I make it onto Steel Drive again, and I see more of those things way down the street, fucking staring at me. I take a left into the garage of one of the houses, absolutely decimating the door and getting stuck in the wall. Jumping out of the truck with my rifle, I run into the unlocked abandoned home. It's sitting here, frozen in time. Everyone was gone. There was no way anyone was home. I shoved the fridge over the door leading into the garage. I quickly covered the front door with the couch and ran upstairs. I ran into what looked like a teenager's bedroom. I saw the still unlocked laptop and figured I could use it. If the kid was logged onto Discord and Reddit, he had messages with one of his friends, both of them mentioning a weird noise coming from their backyards. In a panic, I peer out the window to see more of them, at least a dozen, standing there and smiling that fucking awful smile. I figure that this is the quickest way to call for help. I don't know how long I have. They're just sitting there fucking toying with me. I'm so scared. I want to see my girlfriend one last time. Or my mother. Or my fucking dog or something. I didn't get to say I love you to my mom. I'm 23. I should have had more life to live. Please help me. Alright, y'all, that is the end of our creepypasta story for today. I like those type of stories. It's kind of like those cryptid hunter stories. It's really cool. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope y'all enjoyed it. I will see y'all on Tuesday. But until then, remember, it's scary out there. Please like and subscribe. Howdy, y'all. It's Curious Raven on this Creepypasta Saturday. I hope y'all's week has gone great. Today we have one story. It is by Mr. Gray 42, and it is called Passover. The 1960s were hell of a decade. Between Nam, the Civil Rights Movement, the Cold War, and JFK, saying things were insane would be a massive understatement. Of course, with my tiny hometown of Harley, Mississippi, being the isolated southern farming community that it was, we didn't have much in the way of outside information. We had a town's newspaper, but it didn't bring the news in until at least a week after the rest of the country had learned about it. I still don't know if what happened was a result of turbulence or the other way around. It had been just another scorching day in July of 1968. I remember that I was 12 then. I'd been sent out of the house to go pick up a few things for the local grocery store. The clerk, a kindly old man by the name of Max, begged me goodbye with a warm smile, telling me to say hi to my mom for him. That's how it was most days. Today, though, something was different. As I walked down the sidewalk, groceries in hand, I noticed a group of townsfolk gathered in the town center, muttering and whispering in confusion. Puzzled, I went over to the crowd and asked my friend Matt what was going on. "You mean you haven't heard?" he asked, looking at me like I was stupid. "Some preacher fellas came here this morning. I hadn't heard. An announcement that someone new had come was enough to perk my ears up. We didn't get visitors often, much less from wandering holy men." Peering over the sweaty shoulders of several men, I caught a glimpse of the preacher. and immediately I sensed something wrong with him. At first glance, one might mistake him for just a stranded religious man wearing a long dark priest robe and a wide-brimmed hat, as well as a pair of spectacles. Two things struck me truly strange, though. First was his face. His eyes were beady like a cow's, and he had a wrinkled, elderly face. He was smiling sadly and pitifully, and the sort of smile one might expect a grandfather to give his child after telling them he had a terminal illness. The second was the book his veiny hands clutched. It wasn't like any Bible I'd ever seen. It was adorned with all manner of strange symbols. Even after years of research, I have never been able to determine their origin. The only discernible thing on it was the design of a locust on the cover. The preacher stood facing the crowd, which had grown over the past few minutes to include most of Harley, if not all of it, including my mother, who had wondered what was taking me so long. Then he spoke in a wavering voice. "My father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me." Then he bowed his head and began to weep. It was quiet and soft, as if he were determined not to let us hear him. Tears fell from his bespectacled eyes. Then he said in resignation, "Yet not my will, but yours be done." I knew that verse. Jesus is Glyphsman. But why was this man here to preach that of all verses? And why was he crying? Was he just taken over by emotion felt by Jesus in the verse that he just had to express it out loud? That was when it began. We watched, puzzled by the preacher's sudden appearance and his tears, when we noticed something. He wasn't crying anymore. Now he was chuckling. His shoulders shook as he laughed, his voice slowly rising before his head snapped up to reveal his face, still wet with tears but now stretched into an impossible righteous of a grin as he cackled. His beady eyes were now large, green, and bloodshot. Everyone gasped, backing away, with several younger kids crying. As quickly as the preacher's laughter started, it stopped. He just stood there, grinning like a fox in a henhouse, completely still, save for a twitch every so often. The town sheriff, a 45-year-old Richard Lloyd, stepping forward uneasily, yet mustering all of the toughness of his 20-plus years in law enforcement. I suppose he still figured that this man was still just that, a normal man, a blit with a severe mental condition. "Mister," he said with as much authority as possible, "I don't know who you are or what you're doing here, but I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Preacher ignored him, not even sparing him a glance. "Mister, didn't you hear me?" Richard said firmly. "You're terrorizing these good folks. If you won't leave on foot, I'll have to take you in cuffs." Even the threat of arrest wasn't enough to warrant the preacher's attention. Growing impatient, Richard decided to be the first to approach him, reaching for his cuffs and opening them. Then, as he was about to remove the book from the preacher's hands, it happened, with a speed and strength that shouldn't have been possible for this man of his age. He grabbed Richard's arm and lifted the open cuff to his throat. In the same motion, he buried it into his flesh and drew it across his neck, slashing it open, and blood gushed from the wound. And poor Richard, shocked by the sudden display of power, had no time to even grasp at his wound until it was too late. It all happened within a fraction of a second. It didn't occur to us what had happened until Richard's body lay twitching and bleeding. The pandemonium set in. Most people screamed, running to protect their loved ones, while several fruitlessly tried to stop the bleeding, which the preacher made no attempt to prevent. He glanced at them sideways, though smiling the whole time. It was obvious that he was mocking their attempts to assist him. All too soon the sheriff lay still. The deputy, John Gallo, snapped out of his shock to remove his service pistol from his belt. "Get on the ground," he snarled, anger over his boss and friend's death overriding his shock and horror. "Get on the fucking ground now." The preacher did nothing, but his chest shook slightly with restrained chuckles. I guess what happened next was inevitable. Enraged, John pulled the trigger, and the bullet struck the preacher in the head. He kept standing, even as blood poured rivulets from the hole in his head. John unloaded all of his rounds into the preacher. Still, the monster stood there, grinning at the people who had retreated into their homes or in the nearest buildings. With Max pulling me and my mother into the grocery store, as John began to reload, the preacher extended a hand and again moved unnaturally fast. He seized the deputy's face, digging his fingernails into his skull. We heard only the beginning of a scream before the crunch. Then poor John fell lifelessly to the ground. Then he returned to his spot. The wounds on his body didn't seem to affect him at all, and despite taking a bullet after bullet, the only thing that had been accomplished was making his grinning face that much more ghoulish and staining his robe. How I wish that this had been it. How I wished after killing our town's sheriff and his deputy, the preacher would just leave us. But life can't be that fair for anyone. He opened his Bible and chanted in a bizarre language, gesturing at the corpse. Then he lifted a hand to the sky and raised his voice, as if pleading with God for some miracle. Then in English he cried out, "Richard, John, rise and walk again." Then, as odd and scary as things had been before, they became worse. The bodies of Sheriff Lloyd and Deputy Callow stood up as if it was the most natural thing in the world. They walked over to the preacher and knelt before him, saying something that we couldn't hear from inside. He placed a hand on both of them and what looked to be a comforting gesture, and they stood up. The sheriff's throat was still bleeding, and there was blood leaking from the deputy's crushed skull, but they now sported the exact same grins as the preacher who had invaded our town. For 3 hours, they just stood there staring, smiling as the blood ran from them. Then a man named Nick Webb, our resident town drunk, grew tired of waiting for someone to do something. "Damn you, preacher man," he yelled, stone sober for once, as he broke a glass bottle and stupidly advanced on the preacher. "I don't rightly know what God you's worshipin', but he ain't no God I've ever heard of," and the preacher interrupted by pointing at Nick. All at once, Nick stopped and he fell to the ground, covering his eyes as he howled in agony. Even as he cried out, the preacher quoted scripture again. "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents? He was born blind. Neither this man nor his parents sinned, but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him." Once he was finished, he gestured to Nick to stand, which he did, then joined the deputy and sheriff at the preacher's side. His eyes were milky, and he now had a matching grin as the others. The next week was hell. I don't say that as hyperbole. If there's a hell, then we got a taste of it for a whole week. The preacher was there. Every day he would randomly point at someone's house, speak some verse from scripture, along with an inhuman language that I assume his book was written in, and one of the adult occupants would exit. Several houses' occupants tried to stop them, but after the first couple of screams, followed by silence from their children, nobody else did. I never saw Matt again, and after seeing his mother emerge from the house covered in blood, maybe that's for the best. Then came the 7th day. 12 of the adults had joined the preacher, all injured in some way, all smiling. The preacher stepped forward and called out to the sky in that same language. Something new happened. The symbols on his book glowed a sickly green color. The clear sky darkened as something descended. I say something because I only got a look at it for a few seconds before Max covered my eyes. It was too late, though. What little I saw was burned into my memory. It was enormous, almost as big as an aircraft carrier, if I had to guess. It was dark all over, and the best thing to liken its body would be a locust. There was certainly a loud buzzing to support this. and its skin was made of some chitinous material. But its face, my God, its face. It stared at its followers with a face all too human, despite its insect eyes. It bore the same grin that tormented us for the past week, only this belonged to something beyond this world, beyond all logic. Then came the culmination of our week of horror. Creature made one final declaration, but he wasn't smiling anymore. Now he was weeping. "My lord, into your hands I commit my spirit," he cried out. Then the damn thing spoke in the preacher's voice, but it was now a hissing, throaty, distorted mess with a sadistic, mocking tone to it. "Well done, good and faithful servant." Then it ate him, followed by the 12 who joined him. But it didn't just pick them up and swallow them. No. It chewed, just as a locust might do to crops. It ate everything, down to the last drop of blood they had shed. And then, just like that, it left without a trace, save for the bodies of those who tried to stop its food. And something else. The book preacher held now lay in the center of town. Nobody dared to touch it. Understandably, everyone alive skipped town by the end of the month. By then, Harley, Mississippi was a virtual ghost town. That was about 55 years ago. I never went back to Mississippi, let alone Harley. To this day, I don't know what exactly happened there, who the preacher was, or how he and the thing did what they did. There is something I do know, however. 2 weeks ago, I found a video on YouTube of some urban explorer who apparently liked to record his findings of old ghost towns nobody's ever heard of before. It wouldn't have caught my interest except for the title of the video, Harley, Mississippi. I watched as he wandered the empty streets of my hometown. Of course, finding human bones in some of the houses scared him, but unfortunately not enough to scare him into leaving. Before he could, he focused the camera on a small black object in the center of town. I knew what it was, and I silently pleaded, "Don't, please don't." He reached a trembling hand out and picked it up. I averted my eyes. I never wanted to see that damn book again, let alone read it. He was nervous from what I could hear. He made a note to report the bodies to the state police. He hasn't uploaded any videos since then, and his subscribers appeared to have noticed. I write this as a warning. If a strange preacher with a book like that comes into your town, you need to hightail it out of there. If you can't do that, then I'm afraid all I can say is good luck. That was a really good story, I must say. I mean, it like piqued my interest to go, let me look up Harley, Mississippi. Because I know there are some ghost towns and stuff like that. Some weird stuff that people have seen. I hope y'all enjoyed that story. I will probably see y'all later on next week because, like I said, I'm going out of town. I love y'all so much, and I will see y'all next week sometime. But until then, remember, it's scary out there. Please like and subscribe. Howdy y'all, it's Curious Raven. I'm finally back. I know I have taken about a couple weeks off. I had a lot going on with my mom, as you know, and traveling and getting back home, situating everything here and doctor's appointments, and it's been hectic. But we're back. I will be posting another video tomorrow as well, and then on Saturday. So let's get back into the groove and let's read some scary haunted house stories. Number 1, I just told my grandma I heard a female giggle in the corner of my bedroom after I woke up. She told me she heard a giggle this week in her bedroom too in the morning. She chucked it up to be my grandpa, perhaps laughing in his sleep. Our bedrooms are in one house facing the garden. We previously encountered a strange entity appealing in those 3 bedrooms facing the garden. Me and my cousin drew a picture of it separately without describing it, and the drawings were almost identical. It had huge wavy tangled hair, was child size and had huge black eyes or holes for eyes. We have no idea what this might be, or even if the giggles come from the same entity. Any ideas of what this might be? Number 2. This evening, I was watching a movie in my basement with my dogs. Suddenly, they looked up towards the stairs like someone came in through the garage. I heard some footsteps and called out upstairs to see if maybe someone from my family had come home. The second I called out, the steps stopped. My dogs were very on edge, and so I went upstairs to investigate. The steps were very loud and very distinct as they moved around my house. My dog started wailing and wanted to leave the house. I called out again and the steps stopped again, and then some loud banging followed. Someone sounded like they were clearly walking around and responding to my calls. I went into the rooms where the footsteps that were clearly walking around, but there was no one there. When I came back into the kitchen, different lights were on. I didn't turn them on. I got freaked out and grabbed my dogs and drove to my neighbor's house. At that point, I know my family members would be back later, so I waited it out. Before anyone asked, we did check to make sure that no one broke in and there were no physical signs. I don't think what was in my house was a physical human being. I'm posting this on a throwaway, as I'm not sure what happened to me. I was wondering if anyone could shed some light. Am I just losing my mind or something? What doesn't make sense to me is how my dogs were so freaked out and aware of it as well. Number 3. I had a few paranormal experiences throughout my life, but this one is the most recent. Over the past year of living in this house, I sometimes hear a soft female voice ask a question when I am not paying attention. It's not the vents because I can hear the voice when the vents are completely off. It's not the pipes because I know what those sound like. I can never quite make out what she's saying, except for once I asked her to come closer and she did. She asked her question, and it sounded like she said, "Can you hear me?" Told her obviously I could, but nothing ever came of that. I don't think anyone believed me for a while. Then one day my parents and I came home from a trip, and my brother and my cousin both said that they heard her as well. My cousin had come over one day on his lunch break and didn't know that we were out of town, and my brother was at work. He opened the front door and called out, and heard a soft female voice say, "Hello?" That night when my brother got home from work, he was in the process of getting ready for bed, and he got to his room and he was closing his door when he heard the same soft voice say, "Have a good night." It scared him so bad that he walked around the whole house with a blade, but of course didn't find anyone. Question lady seems to be nice. Sometimes I wake up feeling her tapping on my headboard or on the mattress. Once I couldn't sleep because she was humming to herself. But I always have a calm feeling when she's around. And even my sister has met her. She met her long before the rest of us. She woke up one night with feeling that someone was standing next to her bed. So she reached out and felt a tingling sensation, as if she was touching something that wasn't really there. She likes to say she shook hands with the ghost. Question lady isn't the only ghost we have here, but the other one is not so nice. He likes to be scary. So I try not to talk about them too much because even talking about her seems to invite him. I might post more about them later, but definitely not when I'm in my own home. Number 4. To begin, I have to mention that the house is an old farmhouse. It's set out in the country with farm acreage in front and state land towards the back. Love the location with only 10-minute drive into town. We only have one close neighbor, so it's pretty private for the most part. previous owner had bought the house on an estate auction since the person who owned it died. Elderly lady who grew up in this house and actually had a lot of acres along with the house. I was told she died in the house. They found her days later. I also heard her son had died at the house too. They said he hanged himself in the garage, even though I don't know for sure. The house has had many updates through the different owners, including myself. I don't really know how old the house is. I believe it's very old, and I've tried looking into the history of this house. I wouldn't be surprised if it was built in the early 1900s. After we bought the house, we heard stories of the house being haunted from the previous owners. Never imagined it being true. My first experience was when our dog was in the living room late one night. She was whimpering like she was afraid of something and looking towards the wall or even one of the bottom rooms, but there was no one there. I called her over to me, thinking to myself how odd that was. One day, I had just taken a shower and heard someone tapping on the door handle. The handle was pretty loose, and it could only make that noise unless you press or tapped on it downward. I said just a minute, then opened the door thinking it was one of my kids needing to use the bathroom, but no one was there. I called out, but no one was near. I asked everyone, and they all said they'd been outside playing. I've always been a skeptic, so I just brushed it off. There had to be a logical explanation, right? There is one room in the house. Whomever has slept there has felt the bed shift, as if someone had sat on the edge of the bed while they slept. All three of my kids, all grown now, experienced this when they slept in that room at different stages in life. Funny thing is that they all didn't know about it until years later. I had told my son not to mention it to my youngest daughter, or she might be too afraid. Come to find out that she felt it too. My husband has heard someone calling his name when he was sleeping at least 7 times in a 3-month period. He also heard footsteps downstairs when he's been home alone. One time, I had just gotten home from work and was talking to my husband. Then my cell phone starts ringing, and it's the house phone calling my cell phone. We both looked at each other, knowing we're the only ones at home. I asked him, "Did you try calling me before I got home, and that's why the house phone is calling me back?" Of course, he said no, and that was very weird. I heard my daughter's voice calling out to me, saying, "Mom," when she wasn't even home. And my husband has heard my daughter call out the word, "Mom," too, when he was home alone, too. Another time, my husband and I heard a clear male voice coming from the back room in the house. I thought it was my son, but no one was there. I never felt scared at our home. Wait, I did feel scared once when I was home alone. I had been home from work and relaxing when all of a sudden I heard something fall down in the upstairs bedroom. It was pretty loud. It was 10:30 p.m., and that really freaked me out. I hurriedly went to the kitchen and grabbed the biggest knife we had. I kept looking upstairs, wondering if I should go investigate what had caused that loud noise. My husband was at work, so I called my son, who at the time was at a party 30 minutes away. I told him what happened and that I was freaking out. He comes over with several of his friends to the house. They're all carrying lock and load and do a sweep of the outside and inside of the house. My son even checked the crawl space under the house. They didn't find or see anything that could have made the noise or any intruders. I felt safe after that. I've heard the wood floor creaking 10 feet away from me and looked knowing that I'm home alone. But I didn't feel a bad vibe other than that experience with the upstairs noise. There's many more things that others experienced in our home, but I'll stop here. Number 5. When I was 15, I started to develop insomnia, so I would always be up late, unable to sleep. One time when I was awake, I felt if there was someone there with me. It felt as if I could feel my great aunt watching over me. I had chills down my whole body. It felt like my heart was in my stomach. The next morning I came upstairs to see my parents, and my mom told me that my great aunt died that night. Also, when I told my mom about the story, she said she had a similar experience. When my mom got married to my dad, my great aunt gave them a wedding present. I don't remember what it was. It might have been a rock. She was artistic and made a bunch of pottery, so it really could have been anything. And when I was 14, we moved from my childhood home to a different house closer to my school. When we moved, my mom lost the wedding gift from my great aunt. She went through all the boxes, cleaned out every room, and couldn't find it. And when my great aunt died, she looked even harder for it and still couldn't find it. But on my great aunt's birthday following her death, the wedding present appeared on the top of the shelf where she used to keep it at the old house. Number 6. My mother-in-law has long expressed that strange things happen to her no matter where she goes. Long ago, she would come home to her shot glass collection being lined up on the coffee table every day, and every day she would put them back up on their shelf. She lived alone after her first husband's traumatic death. She often lost or misplaces things. Recently, it's been small things adding up or outright disappearing out of thin air. She was with her friend and her friend's phone rang saying, "John is calling," which is the name of her deceased husband. They answered it, and it was just static on the other line with no call history when they hung up. Her and her friend have been seeing a man with cobwebs on him in the Ring doorbell camera when they look in the mirror of the car. She has had several encounters that could be passed off as coincidence or electrical problems or forgetfulness, but when too many coincidences add up, you start to recognize a pattern. Anyone have advice? See a priest, psychic, burn sage, get the tattoo from Supernatural like Sam and Dean? Number 7. Longtime reader of this page. I've had quite a few strange occurrences, but this one house I lived in was a lot. I lived with 3 friends, all in our early 20s. The house would have been built in the 1900s or earlier. My room, I would sleep terribly. I'm a great sleeper, and as soon as my lights were off, I would feel a suffocating feeling of darkness. It's hard to explain. Air would feel thick. One night, I fell asleep on my back with my knees up, as I had a sore back. I woke up to the feeling of someone rhythmically tapping hard, thudding on my kneecaps. I was frozen in fear as it was dark and was a force feeling. Bolted out of the room and ran to my friend's room. When I would shower, I would hear a roommate arrive at home, stomping in the wooded hallway, etc., typical loud roommate movements, and then would open the door to start chatting after the shower and the house would be empty. Would text everyone and not a single person had been home. At this stage, I was worried. Also about an intruder, of course, but had a feeling of dread every time. We had a new male roommate move in, a really sweet guy. He was decorating his room when moving in and hung a cross decoration on an existing hook. He was kind of goth. A while later, it caught his eye, and it was swinging side to side against the wall. He had just moved in, so he didn't want to seem weird and tell us, but this guy was spooked. We found out when things got worse, and we all discussed it. Another roommate had a wall in her room with a walk-in wardrobe area behind it. One night, she woke up to see what she thinks was a person peeking around, staring at her, like the exact silhouette, and screamed for us to help. And there was nothing there. Well, no real person anyway. Last thing was, we had lights which kept blowing. We asked our electrician friend to come check the attic space as it was an old house and could have been anything. He went up there while we were all at work. Apparently, he had his torch up there, and it was kind of dark, and he had shown it on a big framed painting. He got a fright and went to look closer, but then it disappeared. Like, searched the whole perimeter of the space, and this giant painting was gone. He got such a bad feeling over him that he almost fell out of the manhole trying to scramble out. Anyway, that is all. We also talk about it at times, but obviously moved out as soon as possible. Sometimes I drive by that house and still get a shiver. Such bad energy. Alright, y'all, that was the end of the stories today. I hope y'all enjoyed this collection. I'm very happy to be back. I feel like I'm getting back into my groove again. Just know that I love y'all very much, and I've missed y'all. Well, we'll see y'all on Thursday. But until then, remember, it's scary out there. Please like and subscribe. Howdy, y'all. It's Curious Raven on this Thursday with some paranormal stories from more public areas. I hope y'all enjoy. Number 1. I was living in Okinawa, Japan, from the age 4 to 7. We bounced around a few apartments, but ended up in a military housing. Concrete floors, metal doors, mainly to help with typhoon season. Still, not homey. To set the scene, I had a little TV in my room that my mom would set a timer on. I remember waking up and always watching it shut off. Maybe I was trained to know when, but it was eerie to say the least. I would then see about 7 shadows walk from the window across the room and out my door. My room was on the 2nd floor, so there was no way it was just people's shadows from the outside. I remember laying there in bed terrified under the covers after having seen them. They were all different height and one being particularly short, my height. She had pigtails as well, and I made the connection of her shape to Angelica from the Rugrats. Now I tell my mom that she was in my room at night after being frozen under the covers for God knows how long. I would eventually run across the hall and into my parents' room. I would crawl between them and try to get comfy, only to see just one shadow in their room that I called Seaweed Man. He looked covered in stuff. Getting older, we all kind of realized it may have been a soldier in a ghillie suit. I remember this happening a handful of times, but my parents said it was almost every night. My dad would hear toys going off in the middle of the night. He would get up thinking it was me, but I'd be sound asleep in my room. The area would be ice cold, he said. You know, the classic shit. It's undeniable what I saw when I was younger, and it has impacted me so much. I struggled so much in high school just with philosophy on everything. Why are they stuck here? Are they aware? Is energy just repeating itself because they exuded so much fear in one moment? As I got older, it became something too familiar, almost like I missed the fear. And when in areas that may have the same type of thing going on, I can almost smell it. Anyways, hope you enjoyed. And if anyone has ever lived in that area and has had similar experiences, let me know. Number 2. So for context, I work in a very old bank, and it is the last bank left in town. I think the building was originally built so that it could be lived in as a home in case the property didn't sell, but I don't think anyone has ever actually lived in it. This is why I'm on the fence about what we heard. To start, me and my manager were getting ready for the end of the day. It's a small branch, and only 2 to 3 people are working at a time. We were silently working on our computers behind the teller line when I heard blatant footsteps in the lobby. The first thing I did was look over at my manager to see if she was still standing there, but she looked at me as well. She asked me if I had heard the same thing, and I said yes. Those are definitely footsteps. Since we work in the bank, our first train of thought was that someone may have snuck inside. Obviously, we got a little scared. My manager walked through the first floor and verified no one was there. We also have an upstairs, which is locked and used for holiday decoration storage. So she checked upstairs and found nada. She told me she was going to call security guy after we left. I joked that it was a ghost and we both agreed it was super creepy. Moved on with our day and left. Then she sends me a message like an hour later telling me the person who had come in to clean a couple of days ago had also heard footsteps and voices. He had reported it to a security guy as well, which was how she found out. After what had happened with the cleaning guy, a different manager had gone to the branch 2 days ago after hours to check it out, and he swears he shut the light off upstairs, but then it was turned back on. Obviously, this second happening could have just been a honest mistake. I think I do things all the time when I didn't actually, like turning a light off. The first thing I did was ask my manager if the building had an attic. I've heard too many horror stories of people discovering that someone had been living in their attic after hearing random footsteps and voices. Nope, no attic, just a crawl space to get to the HVAC. Anyways, I'm super creeped out now. I'm convinced that my work is haunted. I think I'm going to go upstairs next shift and pull a Zach Bagans. If you're here, show me a sign. And hopefully it doesn't throw a Christmas tree at me. Number 3. This recounting of my personal experience is 100% factual. I never embellish. It involves real events and suicide. It was 2010. I was at Fort Drum, New York. My unit, 1st Brigade Support Battalion, just got back from deployment, and we were doing 24 guard duty at the barricade. One guy that was there a lot ended up becoming well known by us in our unit. Every time I'd be on guard duty, I'd talk with the guy. There was nothing else for me to do except watch movies or talk to the other guy I did on guard duty with or him. So I talked with the guy a lot, and eventually he told me his story. He said that he was upset because his unit was deployed and he'd been held back on what's called Rear D because of some psych problems that kept him from deploying. He said the Army was looking into his case and that he was planning on deploying sometime later. He told me the unit he was attached to was the second unit he was attached to. The first unit deployed without him because of the same problem, and a couple people he knew died. We rotated out with 24-hour duty, and after some weeks it became my turn again. I remember not seeing the guy after thinking about him and getting up, looking all around the building for me to talk with him and see how he was. I felt bad for him in his situation. And I remember not seeing him. I went back and sat next to the other guard on duty and asked about what was going on with the guy and why he wasn't there. He told me the news. He just found out that he was not going to be deployed again. I think I might have thought that I'd seen him again. It was sometime soon after that I was just getting home after working in the DFAC near 5th Armored Dive Drive. I got to my barracks and noticed police cruisers with their lights in front of the barracks next to ours. That's where the unit he was attached to stayed. I probably didn't think much of it and went on to my room. At the time, it was a new barracks where you have your room that you share with one other person. But then you have your own personal room and your neighbor has his own personal room. Just to give you an idea of the room. My room size was just big enough for one bed along the back wall, one desk just before the bed, and one dresser near, but to the left of the foot of the bed. The room also had a closet to the other side of the dresser. And it was late night, so I'm just about to go to bed. I get changed, turn the lights off, and turn the TV off. I never even closed my eyes. I hear a dog growl coming from my closet. Dogs aren't allowed. But it wasn't a dog because there was not a dog in my closet. I immediately sat up with my feet on the ground, sitting on the side of my bed, when I seen an orange orb form near my door and shoot past my head, going across the room in a second. Without hesitation, I got up and went to my window to see if it was a car. But then it occurred to me that the closest road was on the other side of the field and a good distance away, possibly 200 feet away, and the trees lined the road in front of the field. There would not have been any way that a car could have caused that. Plus, I remember the blinds being down. The thing that's real effed up, the next morning, we're a morning formation, and the first sergeant put out. There was a suicide in the barracks right next to us. If anybody knows the person, there's counselors available. To recount, this still makes me choke up. Also, I remember the counting vividly because I tell it over and over, but there's always people that don't believe in ghosts. But I also write down my experiences to limit the inaccuracy and to be as factual as possible, which I suggest others to do as well. Number 4. I just recently, after a decade of denial, admitted to myself that the things I've seen, heard, felt, and known without explanation are not something that makes me a madman. I have been working multiple night shifts at a historical business for years. I know men have both worked and devoted their lives to this place, and some lost their lives here. I know some of them never stopped doing their jobs and respect it. But I'd rather not be startled to the point of fight or flight every time someone or something wants to announce their presence. I definitely know one presence I experience frequently is a previous owner of the property and business. He tends to just follow me around the facility and I can hear his footsteps. I work 12-hour shifts, and most of the time, I'm the only employee at the facility for days at a time. I used to brush this stuff off as nothing. But after recently accepting this, maybe this shit is real. It's getting more frequent and more intense. I'm not freaked out by the experiences themselves, but the increased frequency and what I believe to be multiple entities is starting to get to me. Anyone know why I've had this sudden surge in awareness? I have always had premonitions that were unexplainable and excellent judgment of character. But now I am seeing dead people. They're not scary. They don't care if I'm here at all. Because I'm not. I'm not where they are. We're just crossing paths, maybe. I don't know. This shit is weird and it's making me feel crazy. Number 5. I'm sorry, but I feel sick and I don't know where else to get this out here. This just happened and I'm in shock, but I try to recount the best that I can. So I work in a tiny town at the local post office. I'm the only person there and know just about everyone by name. I have a few regulars that come in and I speak to a little, just the usual hellos and small talk. Today was no different. I spoke to my regulars as usual. I specifically remember speaking to one older lady who I'll call N, comes in near the end of my shift every day around 3:45 to 4 p.m. every day. It's now 9:30 p.m. I'm at home and I overheard my parents talking about a car accident that happened right outside the town I work at, where an 87-year-old woman was killed and the name was just released. It was N. It happened this morning at around 6 a.m. But I know damn for sure I spoke to her today. It was a quick hello and have a good evening, but I know I fucking did. I feel like I'm going crazy. I don't even believe in ghosts that much or give it much thought, but what the fuck. I'm sorry for all the typos and shit, but I just gotta put this out there somewhere. Number 6. Many years ago, I belonged to a volunteer fire company in Oxford, Connecticut. One of the elder statesmen in the firehouse, Carlton, grew up in the same town I did, about 30 miles away. We became quite close because of this. A few years into my membership, Carl had gotten sick and passed away. I was one of the ones in the FD chosen to be a pallbearer. Carl always wore tan trousers and had a different color polo shirt every day. He was buried in tan trousers and a navy blue polo with our FD logo on it. Late one night, I was the last one in the firehouse, just finishing up some paperwork and manpower reports for the chief's office. The rule was last one to leave has to make sure the house was secure. It was around 10:30 to 11 o'clock when I started my rounds to make sure all was locked up. When I came out of the meeting room onto the apparatus floor, Carl came out of the men's room in his tan trousers and polo shirt about 15 feet away from me. I saw him with my very own eyes. It was so real, I even called his name. He didn't look at me or even acknowledge me, just walked behind the engine towards the back of the house. By the time I got back behind the engine, I saw him turn the corner towards the back bays. I called out Carl again. By this time I got out there, he was gone. I know I saw him. He loved the Oxford Fire Department so much. My guess is he couldn't leave. Number 7. I know how this sounds, but hear me out. My sister and I lived together as roommates. August of 2023, 6 months ago, we moved into a new apartment. Well, new to us. The building itself was built in the 70s, but that's just fine with us because it means that the rent is $400 less than our old place. We've known for a while that this place is probably haunted. It's mostly just, did I see that? Type encounters. Shadows out of the corner of our eyes. I have often said that it feels like one entity, and it feels female. One night, while laying in bed, I saw a glowing yellow figure walk past me. But of course, it was gone when I looked. 2 encounters really stand out. Number 1, I saw a shadow walk out of my room and down the hallway. But when I looked to see what it was, my sister said, "You saw that too, right?" So it wasn't just me. Number 2, my sister was in the bathroom off the hallway and saw something walk past the door so clearly that she thought it was me and called out to it, only to realize her mistake when I answered from the living room. This morning takes the cake. We have a dog, a 40-pound pit mix. It's just a sweetheart of a girl. Can be a bit of a prima donna sometimes. She sleeps in my room with me, in her own bed. This morning, I was in the bathroom getting ready, like I do every morning. This wasn't enough for my dog, but she is very eager to go out of the room and start our day. I could hear her outside of my bathroom. I have an ensuite, doing her little tippy-tappy dance. I then heard what I thought was my sister talking to her. I sleep with the fan on for noise, so it wasn't that odd that I didn't hear the door open. I couldn't make out a lot of what my sister said, except I could hear her say, "You need to wait," to my impatient dog. I even called out to my sister's name, but I didn't get a response. I finish, I leave the room, and hear my sister greet my dog from her room. There, I thought, it was her, so I go in and only to find her still in bed. Now my sister isn't the get up, then go back to bed for 10 minutes kind. Once she's up, and it made no sense for her to be in my room and then go back to bed, as her alarm was about to go off. Just to be sure, I asked if she had been in my room. As expected, she answered no. So apparently my dog has been making friends with the local ghost. Enough that it feels free to scold her when she's being a little shit. Just because I know people will ask, we have people below and above us. But I only sometimes can hear them talking, and only when it's quiet. Even then, it's very muffled than what I heard, and it definitely came from the same room, not above or below. Also, we're both just fine with sharing our home with a benign spirit. That is the end of the stories today. I hope y'all enjoyed. Also, I wanted to kind of get y'all ready for next week. I don't know if there's going to be any videos. I might do on Thursday or Saturday, sometime in those days, a compilation of true crime videos that I did on my other channel, so y'all could hear them too. But I am going out of town to take care of my mother for about a week because she is having hip surgery. Anyways, I love y'all so much. I hope y'all have a really great day. I will see you on Saturday for Creepypasta Day. But until then, remember it's scary out there. Please like and subscribe.
I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in the cradles, profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross